and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading another audio array of terrible tales from the very sinful Radio 2 listener. It might be that one of these stories provokes something dark in your heart. I'll give you the email address when we're done with these. The concise collection this week involves a coffin caused calamity, turkey-based treachery involving a family-fueled fib, which is almost as long as the confession, a bad boy's B-day breakage, lots of fun to be had with a B-day, we discovered, and a handy hotel worker's luckless landlady. Here it all comes. Dear Father Simon and the ecclesiastical gathering, it is with great irony that I find myself writing to you to ask for forgiveness for my sin, which took place in a church. And as my misdemeanour involved the parish priest, is David, Bobby, okay? As my misdemeanour involved the parish priest, I can't exactly turn to him for forgiveness, so I'm turning to you, Brother Matthew, and
parish
you, Sister
priest.
Bobby.
Okay. Yeah.
My story starts in November 2002. At the time, I lived with my wife and our 2 young children in the southeast of England. That's been vaguified. My family and I had become regular churchgoers after we discovered that the admissions policy of the local primary school not only required offspring to be baptised, but you also needed to be attending on a regular basis. I must say, however, that having started going to church again for the first time in 10 years, I really enjoyed it. One Sunday, we arrived at church a little early, and I was approached by the parish priest, a wonderful Irishman in his 60s, who we shall call Father Peter. He asked me to carry out one of the Bible readings that morning, as he'd been let down by another parishioner, and I agreed. So after Mass, Father Peter approached me to compliment me on my diction, my confidence, my passion, and my belief during the reading. He followed up this compliment by telling me that I would be the ideal candidate to lead the baptism programme. Put on the spot, how could I say no? So there I was, now the official coordinator and lead on the baptism programme for the local church. Now, the baptism programme involved parents and soon-to-be godparents of children attending 2 evening meetings to learn about the reasons for baptism. The first evening meeting was always held in the church hall. The second one was held in the church a few days before baptism Sunday, with Father Peter in attendance going through the readings and organising where the families would stand. It was essentially a rehearsal, a fully-fledged rehearsal. Now, we roll forward 2 months. I arrive at church on a miserable, cold, wet Thursday evening to get ready for the second meeting with a group, and members of a few families were waiting outside with their offspring, some of whom were behaving rather badly. Something inside of me told me this was not going to be an easy evening. I told them I had to go and switch on the lights before they were allowed to enter. I let myself into the church. I had been trusted with a set of keys. The church was in darkness, but as I had done this all before, I knew that I had to walk along the right-hand side as the switches were on the wall to the right of the altar, next to the door that led to the sacristy. The sacristy, as you may well know, is the room where the sacred vessels are stored. I flicked the switches on, turned round and was about to go and open the main doors to let everybody in, when I noticed that there was a problem. And the problem was in front of the altar. And the problem was a coffin. Well, I froze. I turned off the lights, quickly exited the church, locking the door behind me. By now, their number of families had grown and the rain was falling heavier. I told them that the lights weren't working and I had to go and find Father Peter. You stay in your cars and you don't go in the church.
Don't go in.
Don't go in. I was pointing and everything. I hurried across the car park to the vicar's house and knocked. Father Peter opened the door. I told him about the coffin and reminded him that we had a baptism preparation meeting scheduled. He replied, well, let's say like Father Jack in Father Ted. Okay. I was shocked. I didn't know that priests were allowed to use that kind of language. I told him we had to do something very quickly. He said, yes, I forgot that there was a baptism meeting and Patrick is, in fact, lying there waiting for his funeral. That's first thing tomorrow morning. Anyway, we entered the church and locked the door behind us to ensure that we weren't followed in. We walked to the end and I turned on the lights. Father Peter kept muttering to himself. And then he said, well, what are we to do? We can't use the hall because we need to be in here for the run-through. What happens on the day? And the National Childbirth Trust have their AGM in here this evening. At that moment, I came up with the idea and I said, Father, why don't we hide the coffin? Well,
excellent.
Always.
Yes.
Of course.
Why not?
He looked at me and his eyes lit up. I told him that we didn't have time to rearrange the event because it was Thursday and the baptisms were taking place on Sunday. We had to hide the coffin. I know what he said. Let's hide it in the sacristy. Well, I opened the door to the sacristy, and never having been in there before, I was surprised at how large it was. In the middle of the room, however, there was an oak table, and the priest says, there you go, the table, well, that can take the weight. So we propped the door open and went to the coffin. Father Peter went to the head and I went to the feet. Father Simon, I now know the true meaning of the phrase dead weight. To say that we struggled is an understatement. Given that Father Peter was in his 60s, the fact that I have a small build and the fact that it normally takes 6 pallbearers to lift a coffin, it took every ounce of strength for us to lift Patrick in his wooden box and manoeuvre him into the sacristy and onto the oak table. We then hid the supporting trestles. Pleased with ourselves that we'd solved the problem and were only 15 minutes behind schedule, we went to the main doors, unlocked them and indicated to the families that they could now come in. The next 1.5 hours passed uneventfully and the next family stopped asking questions. Everybody left. Father Peter and I looked at each other. Well, he said, now we have to put old Patrick back where he belongs. So the first challenge was positioning the trestles in the right place so that they could support the coffin. Once we achieved that, we then had to lift Patrick off the oak table and return him to his place of rest in front of the altar. This, of course, is a job for specialists, not to be attempted lightly. However, as we were going through the motions, just for a moment, I was sure I could feel Patrick moving just a little bit, but maybe it was just my feverish imagination. Sorry, Patrick, I kept muttering. Obviously, I ate for hours afterwards. Father Peter and I never spoke of that evening again, surprisingly, and 3 years later, my family and I moved away from the area. But over 13 years, I'm still burdened with guilt and need forgiveness, not for lying to the families about the lights not working, not for making them wait outside in the wet and the cold, although many of them sought refuge in their cars. Large cars, you should know. Not for running 15 minutes behind schedule, and not for thinking very un-Catholic way about some of their children being rowdy. But obviously, I seek forgiveness from Patrick by moving him around when he thought he'd done all his moving and sticking him in a room on top of the table. Yours, David, not my real name. The interesting thing there is the reference to Father Ted, because it could almost have been, or in fact, all gas and gaiters for older listeners.
Oh, I say.
So with Derek Nimmo somewhere
well done.
in there at the time. So, what are you thinking there, Sister Bobby? Understandable?
Ooh.
Everyone's trying to do the right thing.
the right thing. Well, the difficult thing, of course, is, the church is a place of sanctuary and respect. So you wouldn't want to upset anyone, and it is, you've got to be respectful at all times, but especially in there. It just brings in mind. The thing is I'm half expecting to see half the cast of the Lavender Hill Mob kind of run in at any moment, or Sid James. But what I think, actually, it's one of those things in those difficult situations, would Patrick have really minded? I'm hoping that Patrick was looking down, having a little bit of a laugh himself and going, now, how are you going to get out of this one, guys? That's what I'm hoping. If I was Patrick, I would forgive. So I'm hoping Patrick's a bit like me and would laugh at it and go, yeah, you're forgiven, guys. What else could you do?
Brother Matthew, speak.
I love this story partly because it ticks my box of having a foul-mouthed priest in it. That's always a big plus as far as I'm concerned. Love those stories.
I blurred that a little.
Yes, but there you go. Well done. I have to say, if I had gone into a church and it was completely dark and I turn on the lights and suddenly see a coffin that I wasn't expecting, I would have lost it and run. And you would not have seen me for dust. They would have forget any hope of doing rehearsals for the baptism. That's gone, because I'm in a car leaving and putting as much mileage between me and the ghostly coffin as possible.
How feeble.
So so well done for sticking. I think what I would have probably done there is you would have gone out to the families and said, do you know what, there's a coffin in there, weren't expecting it to be there. Put it from your mind. It's going to be there, but it's not going to be there when you do your thing. So, we're going to have the rehearsal, just ignore the coffin. But then we wouldn't have had the story. So I am going to forgive just because he provided us with a great story.
Here comes another drive time confession. Gather round. This one comes from Philip. Phillip, in this case, Bobby. Save you leaning over and copying from Matt. I bet you copied at school, didn't you?
I'd never copied at school.
No, just the name on the top.
Just sometimes I get distracted.
By what? What else do you have to do right now?
Well, we don't want to spoil the image.
The latest travel coming in on the radar.
To our lovely listener.
So Philip's tale goes like this. Father Simon and the Collective. My confession starts 14 years ago in a small fishing village in southern Turkey. It's a bit like a James Bond opening kind of pre-title
Same.
sequence, where I'd come to accompany some good friends who were looking for a holiday home in the area. On the second evening, I was walking past a small harbourside bar, and as the door was open, I peered in. There were about 20 or so revellers inside, all in good spirits and apparently very friendly. I was actually off work at the time, recovering from a minor operation, so with this in mind I thought, no, I'll go back to the apartment. Unfortunately, I have the breaking strain of a Kit Kat, so after walking just a few steps away, which is a good expression which I might use in the future, I walked just a few steps away, I turned round and went into the bar. I thought, oh well, one just won't hurt, will it? It'll be all right. Many confessions have a similar opening. I'll just have the one. It'll be all right. Inside, I met some very nice people who were on holiday from Istanbul, and one of the group was a very, very beautiful Turkish lady. We chatted in broken English and Turkish, or Turklish as it became. We only got to know one another briefly as she was heading back home to Istanbul a few days later, but after exchanging contact details, I made contact when I was back in the UK. Eventually, after some months of correspondence, I was invited out to Istanbul for a long weekend where I met my lady friend's mother, family and friends. This soon became a regular thing and everything was great. A beautiful Turkish lady and a new culture to learn and embrace. However, it wasn't long before her family became quite pushy, dropping hints about marriage, and me receiving, as they say in Turkey, and me receiving some stern looks from most of her 10 uncles, who, I have to tell you, were huge men who drove black Mercedes cars. So a little bit scary. So after nearly a year of meeting, I bit the bullet and I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. And everything was fine.
That's very romantic, wasn't it?
It's very, very super. But because weddings are quite big affairs in Turkey, the only fly in the ointment was the prospect of a huge reception with hundreds of unwanted guests. Over there, literally no one is left off the guest list. So eventually, we went on holiday to escape family pressure, and it was there, back in the village where we'd first met the previous year, that we decided to get married right there and then, and not wait for the vast social occasion that was being planned for us. Upon returning to Istanbul, my fiancé's mother and family were informed about what we'd done, and to our great relief, were over the moon. You see, weddings in Turkey usually take place on a different date to the actual reception, so they hadn't missed anything. Why are you looking puzzled?
Oh, right, okay, so there is going to be a reception
So
then.
there's the wedding,
Yes.
done that,
Okay.
reception, haven't done that.
Yes.
Come the reception, there were 400 guests, belly dancers, music, plenty of food and raki, and to finish it all, a 13-tier cake.
Wow.
And that's my story. That's our story. Except, the only thing is, Father Simon, we weren't actually married. Not at all. We had faked the whole thing. With the help of a friend, we forged a comical marriage certificate featuring pictures of both of us, a fictitious imam, even some official stamps made from mascara and an English 2-pence piece. We had duped everyone at the reception. Congratulations on your wedding, they said. You're now married. You must be so happy, say the 400 guests and the belly dancers. Here, enjoy the music and the food and the raki because you're married. Great, except that we weren't. Now, with the pressure off, we were allowed to choose where and when to get married. Ha-ha. A couple of months later, we had a quiet, intimate wedding, followed by a lovely meal overlooking the Bosphorus with a few good friends. Absolutely perfect. We've been married ever since. We have 2 beautiful children. We often laugh about our huge reception, which was orchestrated in order to please some rather pushy family members who celebrated our wedding even though we weren't married. We even still have a full certificate in a frame. Father Simon, would you today, please, give us forgiveness for deceiving my entire lovely extended Turkish family? This will be news to them.
Uh-oh.
Now, here's the intriguing thing. I don't quite understand this at the end. And the fictitious imam in Turkey, who actually turned out not to be so fictitious after all. Yours, hopefully, Philip. What does that mean? That means he pretended, but he actually was one? Or
So they're actually married. They could be.
they are married.
They are. Well,
They're
I know
not
they're married, but they
married,
were
yeah.
married the first time. Not married. So,
No,
so
well, they had I don't know. Anyway, as far as they were concerned, the whole thing, they just made the whole thing up. They had a fan. So that's quite amazing. So they had a huge reception with belly dancers, 400 guests, lots of raki, lots of food. Everyone saying congratulations, getting married, but they weren't married. The whole thing was a fake, and then they could choose the moment and have a very nice time. Sister Bobby, what do you think?
I'm conflicted on this because I think weddings are really difficult because, of course, they're about you. It's your wedding, it's your romance, it's your love story. However, when you've had a child and you've brought it up for millions and hundreds of years and days, you've gone through that. You quite kind of
hundreds of years.
Well,
My
I meant
child
days. Sorry,
is 100 years old.
Yeah, all right. You know,
for
what I mean?
heaven's
You've
sake,
brought it
get your
up,
life
you've
together.
loved it,
You're
and
100.
you want to see it walk down the aisle or whatever, however you're doing it, and you want to be able to give it away to someone else so it never comes back. And then there's just this thing.
You want to give it away? You want to give your child away so it never comes? Go on!
Yes.
You want to make sure that
Sounds
the
good.
wedding happens, so basically it's fine. So being denied that, I think, as a parent is really difficult. However, also, on the other hand, some parents really, let them get married how they want. So I said, I'm conflicted
You're
on this.
100 years old, for heaven's sake, leave my house!
I'm conflicted, but I think in the end, what happens is you got married because they're putting too much pressure on you. Whether it was real or otherwise, then you did get properly married, so it doesn't matter. And also, the big party happened and all the relatives were happy. So it seems that no one is unhappy, really. And it seems like the fake Iman at the beginning actually might not have been fake. So you might have been married in the first place anyway.
I'm confused now. I was fine at the end of the story. Forgiven or not? Yeah?
Yes.
Thing is, Matt, I'm just saying, bear in mind the 10 uncles with their
with their Mercedes.
Carry on.
Well, here's the thing. Obviously, everyone's wedding day is a very special thing and lovely and best day of your life. And it is an enormous amount of faff. It's a huge amount of faff. And all you've done with this is you've doubled the faff. You've just let's have another wedding. Why are we having 3 weddings? Just have the one wedding. So I'm a little confused on this one. I think I am not going to forgive, but I think, as Bobby says, the imam at the start, he may well have married them in the first place anyway, so they didn't have to go through the wedding again and they double the faff. So I am going to more fool you. So actually, it turns out the one who knew what was going on was the imam at the start, and so yes, I am not going to forgive.
This one comes from Paul, Paul, Bobby. Dear Father Simon, please forgive me for I've sinned a most heinous crime. It's a deed so dastardly I fear it was the final nail in British manufacturing's coffin, and indeed so bad that this confession has had to be hermetically sealed inside a tin can. But before we get to the bottom of what I did, I need to set the scene with 2 seemingly unrelated facts. Firstly, I grew up in Wisby in Bradford in the 1970s, and every year a fair would visit for a week on the village green. One stall fascinated me. It had table tennis balls balancing on spurts of water, and you had to net the balls to win prizes. Of course, I was never allowed to try my hand. Secondly, we fast forward to the 80s, and my mum, having clearly been on a day trip to France, has decided to get a newfangled device for the bathroom, and it is, of course, a bidet. So, the Saturday after the bidet was installed, I mean, you may well already be ahead of me, I was home alone and a little bored. And it was at this point that I remembered the fairground attraction with the balancing balls from nearly 10 years previously. And so it just so happened that we had a few old table tennis balls lying around the house. I spent the next hour trying to balance a table tennis ball on the spurt of water coming up from my mum's new bidet. You'd be amazed at how much fun that could be. Have you ever tried that?
No.
It seems like a good use of time, really.
Yeah. Anyway, could I do it, Father Simon? No, I could not. I could get the water to dribble. I could get the water to spurt so violently it took the paint off the ceiling. Could I get the pressure just right to balance a table tennis ball? No. It seemed to have 2 settings, dribble and paint stripper. My mind boggled. It was at this point that I realised that there was another spout that the water could come out of, and that if I put my thumb in it and put the water on, the pressure would build up and build up and build up, and then the water would gush out when I removed my thumb. So I did a few tentative short pressure builds, and after that success, I went for the big one and kept my thumb in place, building up the pressure for quite a long time, maybe minutes. What fun, Simon. What fun this was. What can go wrong? After the big one, I decided to do one more, and of course bigger and better than before. I stuck my thumb in the hole and I turned on the taps. The pressure built, and obviously don't try this at home. The pressure built and built and built and built, and suddenly there was a dull thud and no pressure at all. And then I saw the sides of the bidet were completely broken and shattered all over the bathroom floor. At this point, I had one thought, and that is this: I am dead. See, my mum is 5'4" of pure gristle, and not someone you want to get on the wrong side of. However, I then realised that the sides had broken away in 3 big pieces, and what's more, they could fit back together on the bidet without falling out again. The cracks were hard to spot too, and I was beginning to think I might just survive. But putting the bidet back together only solved the first issue because the carpet was absolutely sodden. So I got my mum and my sister's hair dryers, peeled back the carpet and the underlay, and I dried the lot before putting it all back together again. My mum and sister came home soon afterwards, and I decided that the best thing to do was to keep out of the way and wait for the inevitable. But nothing. Not a thing. It seems I had a stay of execution, but surely she would find out later. Well, later came and went. Sunday came and went. A whole week came and went. 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Quite clearly, I had committed the perfect crime. I am scot-free. Miracles, it seems, do happen. To be honest, after about 3 weeks, I'd completely forgotten about the bidet. That is until the day that my mother was trying to work out why the carpet near the bidet was wet. She was trying it at the time. I became aware of this when I heard a shriek. The shriek was followed by a, "Oh my God!" Both my sister and I rushed into the bathroom. I was avoiding eye contact with my mum at this point by looking in earnest at the side of the bidet that was now lying on the sodden carpet in 3 pieces. My face is flustered and red. My heart is pounding. I am waiting for it. Yes, I am going to be dead. But hang on, there's none of the usual, "Paul, what have you done?" For once, I was not getting the blame. For once, my mum rang the builder. The builder/plumber came and uttered for me miracle words. "It's a manufacturing fault, missus." But hang on a minute, the manufacturer won't just replace the bidet, nothing so simple as that. They decide to send their top man to investigate. The very top man. You know what this means? He won't be fooled. He won't be fooled by me trying to cover it all up. He'll assess the crime scene, see it for what it is, and point the finger, or thumb, to the culprit, which is me. So he duly arrives a few days later and assesses the scene. And another miracle, he actually agrees. It's a manufacturing fault. It's a manufacturing fault, madam. And within a week, my mum is the proud owner of a brand new bidet delivered by the manufacturer's top man. Not just a stay of execution, but a manufacturer's pardon. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. There's always that guilt chipping away at your soul. And that is why I seek forgiveness, not from my mum. There were too many times I was fitted up or punished for crimes and misdemeanours I never committed. And not from the builder either. No, I seek forgiveness from the British manufacturer, who was innocent and had to foot the bill to replace the broken bidet, including their top man, visiting not once but twice, because he hand-delivered the replacement bidet, which still had the same 2 settings, by the way, dribble and stripping paint from the roof. I do pray that you find it in your heart to forgive me, Father Simon. Yours, Paul, Paul. On tonight's... Well, it's an interesting confession, because I'd never occurred to me to try... I mean, I don't know if people do have bidets anymore, but if they do, can you balance a table tennis ball on that little squirt of water? I'm not sure. Maybe you have more controls these days. What would you think, Bobby?
Well, the thing is, there's a bit of domestic science going on. I kind of introduced you to the laws of physics, so I thought it was actually quite ingenious, and well done for amusing yourself quite safely. None of us were to know, actually, the possible outcome, which is what happens when you get uninformed small children playing with appliances like this. It's what happens.
Don't stick your finger in the bidet.
Yeah, that's it. And also,
that's an old musical song.
You had a bidet. How fantastic is that? I don't know anyone had a bidet, except for French hotels. I don't know anyone who had one, so that's fantastic. No, well, I know what they are, and I've obviously seen them, but I've never known a house with one. And I've been in some big houses with 6 bathrooms. None of them have bidets, so I think that's quite impressive. I'm going to say, actually, normally I'd say you should take responsibility for your actions, but you did such a good job of getting it back together, and it did stay together for a while, so the glue must have been quite good, so well done. And actually, in the end, I know the manufacturer had to send a new one, but actually I think you did a good job. And mums are terrifying, so what else were you meant to do? They are scary, especially if she sounded like mine. You're forgiven, Paul.
5'4" of pure gristle. Here's Matthew.
We've got a bidet.
Have you?
And, yeah.
Have you?
Never used it, and it came with the house. Waste of space. Well, literally a waste of... the thing that you could put there, I could put magazines there or something. Is at least take something useful.
Well, now you know that you can balance a table
now
tennis.
apparently these things fall apart. Just a little bit of pressure, putting your thumb over the hole, and the thing... of course it's a manufacturing fault. How is this supposed to be porcelain? How's that been? With the water, just that amount of pressure... Dear, oh dear. So
Look
I
at
am
the state
definitely,
of that.
yeah, I'm definitely going to forgive because accident waiting to happen, I would say. And what was the point of? Well, we won't go into the point of the bidet, but yes, I definitely forgive them.
Here's tonight's confession, and it comes from Yoop, which is Joop. It might be dupe, but I'm saying Yoop because of the way this starts.
That's
eh?
a perfume, isn't it? You.
Well, I don't think
Anyway.
a perfume has written this in.
Just
I think it's
saying.
from a person. Although, I don't know. It could well be. Who knows? If fish can sing, maybe perfume...
Which they can't.
Which... maybe perfumes can write. Anyway, Yoop says... Your recent confession about the Netherlands and food prompted me... There you go, he's Dutch! Everything, there
I
you
think it
go.
could be Dutch for Joseph. I might be wrong, but I think it is.
And food prompted me to write my own confession in the hope of obtaining forgiveness from your collective. In 1981, I came to this country from the Netherlands on a transfer from a famous international hotel chain, starting work in their flagship in London. At this hotel, I worked in the minibar department. Who knew that there was even a department called the minibar department? Refilling the minibars in the rooms after the guests had used them. Sometimes rooms would still be occupied, and sometimes they were check-out rooms and the guests would have left. On the day in question, we checked the rooms and we filled up the minibars as usual until I came to a room that was, to all intents and purposes, a check-out room. There was no luggage, no personal items, and the room was ready for the next guest. All was spick and span. I checked inside the minibar and I found a parcel wrapped up in grease-proof paper. So I took it back to the office. After investigation, I discovered the parcel contained 2 tins with rubber bands wrapped around. I mean, what could possibly go wrong at this point? And an inscription saying something like, "Made in Iran."
Right.
Stop.
I think I know what
Stop.
it is.
And it also had something to do with fish. Inside the tins... What?
Caviar.
Wait.
Sorry,
Wait.
stop. I know. Sorry.
Wait.
Naughty.
Inside the tins, I found lots of salty and fishy kind of fish. It was way too salty and it was way too fishy. As my supervisor wasn't in that day, myself and one of my colleagues decided to take one home each. After all, it was a checkout room. When I got home, I decided that actually it wasn't to my taste. It was way too salty and it was way too black, way too much faff, as Matt would say. And what's with all these little balls, for heaven's sake? Who eats fish like that? I like tuna and kippers and that kind of thing, but these small balls of fishiness were ridiculous. So I gave them to my landlady, Mrs. K, who looked quite pleased, but she did have a different taste to most things in me because she was Polish. However, the next day, it all changed. When I got to work, I was summoned to the personnel office. "Sit down," said the personnel officer from South London. "Where are those tins?" he says with menace. "The fish tins that were left in the fridge." "Oh, I took a tin home, but it is only fish," I said. He says. "It's not really only fish, is it, when it actually is beluga caviar?" Well, I'm not stupid, Father Simon, so I realised that this was rare and expensive stuff. And then the guy says the words that make everything spin. This is 1981, remember? "They're worth £2,000 each." £2,000? Apparently a guest had left the caviar in the mini fridge bar of his room by mistake. And as soon as he realised, he got his PA to demand it back. Immediately. He was also an important client, so I was sent home on my bike to recover it. Would I be in time to save the beluga caviar and my job? I cycled super fast, arriving at my flat in record time with a record sweat on. I burst in and Mrs. K was preparing her feast. She had quite a spread with the caviar still looking stupid in my opinion, but it was spooned onto small pieces of toast. How ludicrous. I snatched it all from under her nose. Mrs. K was dumbfounded. "Sorry!" I yelled as I grabbed the toasties and started to scrape the balls back into the retrieved tin. I got the wrapping and the paper and the rubber band out of the bin. It all looked pretty good, and you only noticed the toast crumbs if you studied really hard. In fact, the tin looked even fuller than it was before. So everything was sorted. I handed it over to the personnel guy and he just stared. I got a verbal warning. You got a verbal warning, you have. But I didn't have to pay the £2,000, so that was a result. But clearly and obviously, I have to ask for forgiveness. Not from the guest, as he shouldn't have left the fish balls behind in the first place, but my Polish landlady, Mrs. K, who was about to have the treat of her life, only to have it snatched from her clutches at the last minute. Also forgiveness from my colleague, who also took some caviar home and had it removed from his fridge by the hotel security team. He got a written warning too. I await your absolution. Caviar, by the way, is still stupid. Yours, Yoop. I've never tasted it, so I've got no idea, no opinion, but £2,000 for a tin is not worth it. That's my expert opinion, because remember, caviar might sing. That's what we've learned. What do you say, Sister Bobby?
I've never eaten it either. But I have to say, I think it's really simple here because, of course, what you'd want to do is look after your guests. And if they've forgotten something, you don't always take stuff home. I mean, guests leave things all the time and you don't assume that you can take it. If someone left their laptop, if someone left their suit jacket, I'm sure there's a protocol you follow and you just follow procedure. Just because it was fish.
Well, he just thought it was fish paste or something.
Yeah, maybe. But I think actually you still follow procedure regardless of what it is because you didn't even realise the value. So there you go.
It's from abroad. Maybe in Holland they do this kind of thing. Help yourself.
I think you find all sorts of things, but I think you should have followed company procedure, which I'm sure there would have been one in a big hotel chain. And I think it's very easy. Dupe.
In 1981, I'm sure there was a law which was finders, keepers, losers, weepers.
Don't think that's the hot.
Is that not right?
That's
it
not
was in
right.
Holland, I'm sure.
You are not forgiven.
Anyway, what do you say, Nigel?
Well, it might well have been that law in the Netherlands, but certainly not here. And Joop's, when he said, "I'm not stupid," well, I have to say on this occasion, Joop, I think you are. Because unbranded, I'm sure there might have been some lettering there if you bothered to read it. Very good.
Yeah, you just said it had something to do with fish.
Yes, well, there you go. And caviar, I mean, Osietra, Savruga, they're the cheaper ones. Beluga is the Rolls-Royce of the caviar world.
Well, don't
incredibly
leave it in
expensive.
a fridge.
There again, you should hand it into your manager, your superior.
He wasn't there.
Well, no, so he just nicked it. Did he not? He took it home without mentioning it to anyone, divided up with his mate. I'm glad they got it back. But if that was my... and it's happened to me, to be honest.
Someone's nicked your caviar?
Yeah, indeed they have, yeah. Once, funny enough, and it was West Country caviar, which we shall bring in and try, which is a lot cheaper, I have to say, funny enough, than the actual beluga from Iran or that part of the world. So absolutely not forgiven, you, and you were lucky to get it back with your carnias intact.
It's not worth it, though, is it?
What?
Money?
Caviar?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out, because you haven't had it before, so we'll put that one to the test.
I bet Matt has it. It's a thirsty treat in your house, isn't it?
Yeah, £2 a pop. I mean, it had better taste phenomenal.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how phenomenal it tastes.
Well, £2 a pop. It better be better than like 2,000 Twixes. I don't think
it's going to be that.
It's not going to be as good as that.
Is it going to be better than kissing your wife? Not that I would
no.
know, obviously. But
wow.
No.
That went down an avenue fast. Goodness me.
She's lovely.
Yes, obviously.
You could sell those kisses for a lot. Allegedly.
My wife's kisses.
I mean, you couldn't really spread the Twix bars either, would you? Unless you melted them. Yeah.
Okay.
Bobby gave me
the beluga.
Bobby gave me one for my birthday, a Twix, but it was a king size. It was a king size.
It was your birthday, yeah.
You nutty thing.
Anyway, what are you saying, Matt?
I'm getting out of this now.
Forgiven or not?
Yeah, forgive. Yeah.
Well, they were this week's confessions. I'm not sure if you'd have forgiven anybody. Anyway, if you have your own dark secret, here's where you send it. confessions@bbc.co.uk. Or you can do what one of our listeners did this week and send it in a tin to BBC Radio 2, Western House, London, W1W 7NY. I've been here for 7 years, never knew that was the postcode. Anyway, more confessions in a week. Don't forget you can listen to all our shows from the last 30 days on the iPlayer. The book club on Monday welcomed Law Eve to the studio. On Monday, that was her book, The Graces. Still a chapter online for that. Darren Brown here on Tuesday to discuss his new book, which is called Happy, in which he goes, yeah, well, this is what it means. But are you really happy, Darren? We'll find out. On Wednesday, Monty Don was in to talk about My Family and Other Dogs. That's his family and his dogs. Nigel did not make it through the security, I'm afraid. And Nige served up blackberry and apple bake on Thursday. Details can be found on the Radio 2 website. Just head for Thursday's episode page. Pull up a chair, toggle down till you hit the recipe, and it should all be straightforward from there. And if you've reached this point in the podcast and you feel like tweeting me just to prove it, today's mystery word is... Flust ahead, Flod Schmidt.